Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mental Edge Trading Psychology Podcast. I'm Sarah, a retired mental health therapist turned trader, and today we are diving deep into something that almost every single trader out there struggles with. So, you know that feeling where you take a loss and suddenly you can't control yourself anymore? Like, you know what to do, you know you should be able to stop yourself, but for some reason you can't do it. Like, you're watching yourself from an out-of-body experience doing the things you know you shouldn't be doing. And instead of stopping, you take another trade and another until the account is blown or you're locked out. And afterwards, you sit there thinking, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just be more disciplined? I don't get it. Well, today I'm going to explain exactly what's happening in your brain when this happens, why trying to be more disciplined makes it worse, and what you can do instead. I'm going to go deep on the neuroscience and give you the complete framework. So grab your notes, get comfortable, and let's talk about why you can't control yourself after a loss. So before I explain what's happening in your brain, I want to explain where this framework actually comes from. In aviation safety, there's this concept called threat error management, and it was developed to help pilots manage mistakes in high-stress situations without making things worse. And the basic idea of it is when a pilot encounters a threat like bad weather or a mechanical issue, they can respond in one of two ways. They can go into what's called error mode, where panic takes over, they make rush decisions, and small problems become absolutely catastrophic. Or they can use threat error management, where they follow a protocol to manage the threat, stay in control, and make good decisions under pressure. The difference between these two responses will determine whether a pilot is going to be able to land safely or crash the plane into the ground. Now, what does this have to do with trading? Absolutely everything, because when you take a loss, your brain perceives that as a threat. So just like a pilot encountering turbulence or engine trouble, you have two possible responses. You can go into what I call threat mode, where panic takes over, you make a rush decision, and a small loss becomes a completely blown account. Or you can use a protocol to manage the threat, stay in control, and make good decisions under pressure. Aviation, they call this threat error management. I call it the threat mode protocol. You recognize the threat, interrupt the automatic panic response, and follow a systematic process to regain control. This isn't some like new age mindfulness technique or anything like that. This is borrowed from an industry where mistakes kill people, and it works. So when I talk about threat mode versus learning mode, I'm actually adapting a proven framework from aviation safety to trading psychology, because the stakes are completely different, right? But the brain's response to perceived threat is exactly the same. Whether you're a pilot facing engine failure or a trader facing a loss, your amygdala is going to activate and your prefrontal cortex goes offline. And when that happens, your automatic patterns take over completely. So the question is, do you have a protocol to manage that response? And that's what we're going to work on building today. When you take a loss in trading, the first thing that happens is you go into what I call threat mode. Let me explain what that means. Deep in your brain, you have a structure called your amygdala. This amygdala is like your brain's alarm system, okay? Its entire job is to scan for threats and keep you safe. When the amygdala detects something it perceives as dangerous, it's going to activate your survival system, which is your fight, flight, or freeze response. And this is the system that kept our ancestors alive when they encountered actual physical threats like a predator, a hostile tribe, natural disaster. And when this system activates your body, it floods with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And this flood causes your heart rate to increase and your breathing to get shallow. Blood starts flowing away from your digestive system and into your muscles so you can fight or run away. And here's the critical part. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of your brain responsible for your rules, your plan, your decisions, your discipline, and trading, that part of your brain basically goes completely offline when that happens. When you're facing a threat to your survival, you don't have time to think through your options carefully, right? You need to act immediately. So your amygdala takes over and your prefrontal cortex shuts down completely. And now the problem is that your amygdala can't tell the difference between a $200 trading loss and a bear about to eat you. Both trigger the exact same biological response in your brain. And your amygdala, it doesn't understand money or trading or the financial markets altogether. It just knows something bad happened to one of our survival resources, because money now in today's age is our number one survival resource. So when it sees that being threatened, threatened, it sees that we lost something valuable, it marks it as a threat. So when you take a loss, your amygdala says danger, danger, and it activates your fight, flight, or freeze response. And suddenly you're now in full survival mode. Now your amygdala has learned through evolution that when you're threatened, you need to do something. You need to fight the threat, run from the threat, just do something, because doing nothing and just sitting there feels absolutely impossible when you're in threat mode. And that's why patience and training feels impossible, because historically doing nothing when you're threatened meant you died. So your brain is screaming at you to act, do something now, take action now, fix it now. In the context of trading, doing something means taking another trade, because your brain has learned that trading is how you interact with this environment. Trading is the action you can take to relieve the discomfort. So if you're threatened and you need to act, you need to trade. This is why it feels absolutely impossible to just stop and walk away when you're in that threat mode. Why it feels absolutely impossible to stay patient while you're trading. Because your survival system is telling you that stopping is dangerous, that you have to act, that doing nothing at all will make things worse for you. And even though logically, if your prefrontal cortex were online, you would know that stopping is really the smart move here. But if you don't have access to logic in that moment, you only have panic and the desperate urge to act, that's your threat mode being activated. That's your emotions being in control. And threat mode is the first piece of why you can't control yourself after a loss. And the second piece of this puzzle is something called the striatum. The striatum is something I am so fascinated with. It is a structure deep in your brain. It's part of the brain we call the basal ganglia, which is basically your habit center, okay? So now the striatum has a very specific job, and that is to learn patterns through repetition and execute those patterns automatically without you even having to think about them. This is actually an incredibly useful function most of the time, because that's what lets you drive a car without consciously thinking about every single movement. You're not sitting there in your car thinking, okay, I have to press the brake pedal with my right foot while simultaneously steering the wheel 15 degrees to the left. You just drive automatically. You know what to do. You know how to get to where you're going. The striatum, it's what lets you tie your shoes without looking, typing on a keyboard without hunting for each letter, or brushing your teeth while thinking about something completely different. All of these are automatic patterns that your striatum has learned through hundreds or thousands of repetitions. And the striatum, it is an efficiency machine. It is awesome because it takes the things you do repeatedly and turns them into automatic habits, so your conscious brain doesn't have to waste energy thinking about them anymore. Through hundreds of trading sessions, a loss leads to panic, which leads to you taking another trade to relieve the discomfort of the loss. Every single time you've revenge traded in the past, you've practiced that pattern. And every time you practice it, the pathway in your striatum gets stronger. Think of it like walking through a forest. The first time you walk a certain path, you have to push through the brushes, step over the fallen logs. It's really difficult to do. But if you walk that same path every single day, eventually you're going to wear down a trail. The brushes are going to get trampled, the logs will be pushed aside, the path becomes obvious and easy to follow. That's what's happening in your brain when you repeat these patterns. You've walked the revenge trading path so many times that it's now a clear highway in your striatum. And here's the thing about the striatum, you guys. It doesn't judge whether a pattern is good for you or bad for you because it doesn't make moral evaluations. It just executes whatever pattern you have practiced most. It doesn't know that revenge destroys your account time and time again. It just knows this is what we do when we feel panic after a loss. This is the pattern we follow and execute. So when you take a loss and go into threat mode, two things happen simultaneously. One, your prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of your brain, goes offline. So now you don't have access to logic, reason, trading rules, discipline. And two, your striatum takes over. And your striatum only knows one thing to do when you panic after a loss: execute the automatic pattern. Open another trade. You're literally running on autopilot when the prefrontal cortex goes offline and it takes over. You're being driven by automatic habits that operate completely below your conscious awareness. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I know revenge trading's bad. I've learned that lesson time and time again. So why doesn't my know that by now? because the striatum doesn't learn through logic or understanding. It learns through repetition and reinforcement. So every single time you execute the pattern, whether the outcome is good or bad, you're strengthening that pathway in your striatum to do it again next time. So even when you revenge trade and lose, you're reinforcing the pattern. You're still telling your striatum, this is what we do when we feel panic. This is what we do in this situation. And on top of that, you have what's called intermittent reinforcement, which is a behavior that is rewarded or reinforced only sometimes, not every time, which makes the behavior more persistent and addictive. So sometimes when you revenge trade, you actually win, right? You actually come back, you save the account, and you have a great green day. But not always, not even most of the time. Sometimes it happens, and that's more than enough. This is the same exact mechanism that makes slot machines and gambling so addictive for people. Because when you pull a slot machine lever, you don't win every single time, right? If you won every time, you'd actually probably get bored and stop playing. But if you never won, you'd realize it's pointless and walk away. Slot machines are programmed to give you wins just often enough to keep you playing. So when you win, maybe 30% of the time, it's just enough to make your brain think, if I keep trying, I'll win. This is what is called intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the most powerful ways to create unbreakable habits in your brain. It's treating revenge trading like a slot machine. Every single time you revenge trade and win, even if it's only 1 out of every 5 times, your striatum learns, see, look, this pattern works. It might win. Let's keep doing it. And because you don't know which time is going to be the winning time, you keep pulling the lever. You keep revenge trading because maybe this time will be the one that wins. Maybe this time will be the time I get that payout. It doesn't care about your overall win rate, your account balance. It only cares that this action might get a reward. Do it again. And the hundreds of repetitions you do, you've built an incredibly strong automatic pattern in your striatum. And when you're in threat mode, when your prefrontal cortex is offline and you don't have access to logic anymore, that automatic striatum pattern, that's all you've got right now. And your striatum, it takes over and executes perfectly every single time. You're watching yourself do it too. You know it's wrong. You know what you're doing, but you're unable to stop yourself from doing it because you're not in conscious control anymore. Your automatic habit system is running the show. I want to be really clear about something here. This is not weak or undisciplined or a character flaw or whatever you're telling yourself when you get upset after revenge trading. This is your brain operating exactly as it was designed. The amygdala is doing its job protecting you from threats. Your brain is operating exactly as designed. The amygdala is doing its job protecting you from threats, while the striatum is doing its job executing learned patterns automatically. And the problem is that these systems are evolved to keep you safe from physical threats in the environment. They weren't designed for abstract threats like financial losses, though. So what they're doing is they're using tools that were designed for bears and predators to respond to losing $200 in the stock market. And those tools just don't work well in this context. They lead to gambling-like behaviors instead. But once you understand what's happening, you can work with your brain instead of against it. And that is when we can start changing everything. So let's talk about why trying to be more disciplined actually makes this problem worse for you. When you tell yourself, I just need to be more disciplined, or I just need more willpower, here's what you're really saying. I need to use conscious effort and mental strength to override this automatic pattern. But the problem with this is discipline and willpower are functions of your prefrontal cortex. They require your conscious, rational brain to be online and functioning to be able to use them. And when you're in threat mode, your prefrontal cortex is offline, and you're trying to use a tool that isn't available to you in the moment when you actually need it most. It's like trying to use a screwdriver when what you need is a hammer. You have the wrong tool for the job. But it's actually worse than that, because trying to use discipline when you're in threat mode doesn't just fail, it actively makes the problem worse. So when you take a loss, threat mode activates. Your striatum starts trying to execute the automatic pattern. You feel the urge to revenge trade. You tell yourself, no, I'm going to be disciplined. I'm not going to do it this time. So You try to fight it with that willpower. And sometimes, yeah, you do win that fight. You manage to resist the urge and you don't revenge trade, right? But sometimes you lose. And that urge is so strong and the pattern is too automatic and you revenge trade anyways. And when you lose that fight, when you revenge trade, despite trying really hard not to, what happens? You feel shame. I'm so weak. I can't control myself. What is wrong with me? I'm never going to get this. So now not only have you lost money, you've added a layer of shame and self-blame on top of everything. So the next time you take a loss, you're not just dealing with the stress of the loss itself anymore. You're dealing with the stress of remembering that you failed last time. The stress of worrying that you're going to fail again. The stress of feeling like you're a weak person who can't be trusted. Now you have more stress, not less. And what happens when you have more stress? Your amygdala activates even more strongly. Your prefrontal cortex goes offline faster, and your striatum takes over even more powerfully. And the automatic pattern that happens with all of this executes more strongly than ever before. And you're accidentally training your brain that stress equals execute the patterns even faster. And every single time you beat yourself up for lacking discipline, you're adding more stress to the system. And more stress means your automatic patterns get even stronger. Let me give you a concrete example of how this tends to play out. So the first week you revenge trade, right? You feel bad about it. You tell yourself, I just need to be more disciplined. And week 2, you take another loss and you remember last week's failure of the revenge. So now you're stressed about the loss and stressed about potentially failing at discipline. This leads to you having more stress than last week, okay? And when that happens, your system is going to take over more powerfully and you're going to revenge trade again. The main goal is to provide relief as quickly as possible through these automatic patterns. These automatic habits, they help us get to relief and safety as quickly as possible. It puts our body and our brains into autopilot to help us escape from danger as quickly as possible. So when we have that extra stress added on from the failures of last week or yesterday, what's going to happen is that the striatum is going to kick on more powerfully because that stress is amplifying it, and it's going to want to get to relief even quicker this time to get you to safety, to get you out of these bad feelings quicker. So that's what happens, and you're going to end up revenge trading again. And on week 3, what happens is now you failed twice, okay? You failed week 1 and week 2. Now you're even more stressed. I keep doing this. I'm such a failure. What's wrong with me? And even more stress starts building up on top of it. The more stress you experience, the stronger it gets because remember, it's looking for relief. It's looking for how to execute automatic patterns as quickly as possible to get you relief. And now by week 4, you've reinforced the pattern even more. It's in complete control. Now you've added layers of shame, self-blame, the stress is higher than ever, and this automatic pattern is stronger than it's ever been before. And you're in this downward spiral. You're blowing accounts. You can't get there. You just keep telling yourself, I've got to be more disciplined. I've just got to try harder, willpower my way through this, back test more, and just stress out over and over again. And you don't know how to break through this loop, break through this shame, and you're just stuck in it and spiraling. Discipline is the wrong tool for this problem because the striatum doesn't respond to shame, willpower, or trying harder. Everything these gurus say, oh, just be more disciplined, just backtest more. That's not what the brain responds to. The striatum responds to one thing and one thing only: repetition. You've repeated the revenge trading pattern hundreds of times, guys. This is a pathway that is a super highway in your brain. You've tried to be disciplined maybe a handful of times successfully, right? That pathway barely exists for you right now. When push comes to shove, when you're stressed and your prefrontal cortex is offline, your striatum, it's going to execute the pattern you've repeated hundreds of times because that is the stronger pathway in your brain right now. Your handful of attempts at successful discipline cannot compete with hundreds of repetitions of the automatic pattern. Discipline is a prefrontal cortex strategy, and your prefrontal cortex isn't available when you're in threat mode. It's like trying to reason with somebody who's having a panic attack. The reasoning part of their brain isn't online. They're just in survival mode. So telling them to just calm down, it's not going to help, right? In fact, it often makes them feel worse because now they're feeling bad about not being able to calm down and they feel like they're annoying or a burden. This is what you're trying to do to yourself when you try to use discipline to stop revenge trading. You're asking your prefrontal cortex to override your striatum to try harder, often get worse instead of better because they are adding stress on top of stress, which makes the prefrontal cortex shut down faster, which makes the striatum stronger, which makes the automatic patterns more automatic. The harder they try, the worse it gets. I don't want to say all this to make you guys feel hopeless. I say it to help you understand. If discipline hasn't worked for you, that doesn't mean you're weak or not cut out for trading, okay? It just means you're using the wrong tool for the job right now and you need a different approach. So if discipline doesn't work, what does work? The solution to this is to interrupt the automatic pattern and build a new one for yourself. Your striatum, it can be retrained. So just like it learned the revenge trading pattern through repetition, it can learn a different pattern the exact same way. But what you have to understand is this is not a willpower versus lack of willpower issue, okay? What we're doing here is we're retraining an automatic brain system that operates completely below conscious awareness, and that requires a completely different strategy. You can't backtest that, you can't out-discipline that, you can't out-willpower that, all right? I've developed instead a 5-step protocol that does exactly this, and I call it the threat mode protocol. It interrupts the old automatic patterns and builds a new one and works with your brain's natural functioning instead of against it. So let me walk you through all 5 steps. The first step is HALT. HALT stands for stop everything now. The moment you notice those threat mode indicators, and I'll talk about what those are in a minute, you take immediate action. Close all your charts, stand up, physically get out of your chair, a timer on your phone. During these 60 seconds, you cannot trade. That is the only rule, okay? No matter what is happening in the markets, no matter how strong your urge is, you cannot trade for 60 seconds. Now, why does this work? It has learned a specific pattern. Loss triggers panic. Panic triggers opening a new trade. And that's the automatic sequence that your brain knows. So, loss, panic, new trade. Halt, it breaks that sequence. And now we're inserting a new step. Loss, panic, stop. You're interrupting the pattern before it completes itself. And when you do this, you're physically removing yourself from the environment where the habit executes. You're not at your desk anymore or looking at charts. You couldn't execute the pattern even if your striatum wanted to. So what this does is it creates space between the stimulus, the loss, and the response, which is revenge trading. And in that space, your prefrontal cortex has a chance to come back online. And with this first step, you're giving your brain 60 seconds to shift out of threat mode and back into rational thinking mode. Now, you'll probably notice a lot of resistance in this step. That is completely normal, okay? Your brain, it's going to tell you, I don't have time for this, the market is moving, I'll miss my next setup, I need to trade right now. That voice, that is your threat mode. And the fact that you feel that urgency is exactly why you need to stop. And if stopping feels impossible, that is a sign that your automatic pattern is trying to take over, which means stopping is exactly what you need to do right now. The second step is to regulate. Once you stop, the next step is to regulate your nervous system. You need to get yourself out of threat mode and bring your prefrontal cortex back online. Remember, when you are in threat mode, your body has activated the sympathetic nervous system, your fight, flight, or freeze response, and now your survival brain is in complete control. To get out of threat mode, you need to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the exact opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. This is the system that tells your body the threat is over, we're safe, we can calm down now, and there are several techniques you can use to do this. I'll give you a few options and you can choose what works best for you, okay? Box breathing, that is my go-to technique personally. And how it works is you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. You hold your breath for 4 seconds. Breathe out through your mouth like you're blowing through a straw for 4 seconds. And hold for 4 seconds again. And that's one full cycle. You want to do that 4 times. It takes roughly about a minute total to do, okay? And what this does is you are deliberately slowing your breathing to send a signal to your vagus nerve, which is the main nerve of your parasympathetic system, that you're safe, everything's okay. And it slows your heart rate down. And when your heart rate slows down, your logical thinking brain can come back online because your body can't be in fight or flight mode and breathing slowly and deeply at the same time. Those two states are completely incompatible for the brain. So By controlling your breathing, you're essentially overriding that threat response for yourself. Another technique is the hand on chest. So put your hand on your chest, right here over your heart, all right? Feel your heartbeat going. Breathe deeply in through your nose, out through your mouth. The physical touch combined with deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system. So if you put your hand on your chest and breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth for about 60 seconds, you're going to be able to slow your heart rate. And when you slow your heart rate down, just like with the box breathing, it signals to the brain, hey, we're safe, everything's good. We can move on now. We're not in danger anymore. We can make a logical decision. And if you're really dysregulated, if your threat response is really strong, you can use something called TIP. This is an emotional regulation exercise through dialectical behavioral therapy, okay? DBT is used for the most extreme emotional dysregulation cases out there. So a lot of these exercises I use, they come from DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And when we use these emotional dysregulation exercises, what happens is we work on our crises intervention. We work on regulating our emotions, our mindfulness, staying calm in the moment. So these work really well for traders because they help us learn how to stay calm in crises and regulate and stay in a wise mind without letting our emotions take over anymore. So an exercise that works well in trading is called TIP, T-I-P-P. T, it stands for temperature. So what you want to do with temperature is you want to either splash cold water on your face or hold ice cubes in your hand. This is going to activate your dive reflex, and what that does is it slows your heart rate down. And again, slowing the heart rate down, it's going to signal to the brain everything's okay because the cold temperature activates the parasympathetic nervous system through the dive reflex. I is for intense exercise. Do 20 jumping jacks, run in place for 30 seconds, 20 push-ups, whatever your hit of choice may be. That is what we want to do for 20 to 30 seconds. Intense exercise is the most efficient way to process cortisol through your body as quickly as possible. Just because trading is what brought the cortisol on doesn't mean trading is what needs to take the cortisol away. You don't have to discharge the energy the same way the energy was brought onto you. Physical exercise, high intensity exercise for 20 to 30 seconds will save your account time and time again because it burns off the stress hormones in your system before they take over you completely. P is for paced breathing. This is the box breathing exercise I described earlier. And the second P is for paired muscle relaxation. So what you want to do is squeeze all of your muscles as tight as you can for 5 seconds and then release. And repeat this 5 times. What this does is it releases physical tension stored in the body. Now, it doesn't matter which of these techniques you use. The goal is the exact same. Get your body out of threat mode, right? So how do you know if it's working? You'll notice your heart rate starts slowing down, your breathing naturally deepens, your tension in your jaws, your shoulder, that relaxes, and now your thoughts start to clear up. You can actually think again instead of just reacting to what's happening. And you want to give yourself as much time as you need for this step. For some people, it takes 2 minutes. For others, it might take 5 or even 10 minutes, and that's okay. Something important to note about it, though, is that if you can't regulate within about 10 minutes, that is really good information to gather, okay? Because it means you either need more time for yourself, take 30 minutes, go for a walk, come back and try again, or that you have deeper nervous system dysregulation that might benefit from working with a therapist in your area who specializes in nervous system work or emotional dysregulation. But either way, if you can't get out of that threat mode within about 10 minutes or so, that is your sign that you are done trading for the day, okay? Don't try to trade when you can't regulate, because the more you try to control something when you're out of control, you're just going to be reinforcing old patterns. And we don't want to do that. You deserve better than that from yourself. And the third step is to analyze. Once you're regulated, once your logical brain is back online, now we can start to analyze what happened. But the key here is we're not opening the charts back up, okay? What we're doing is we're opening our trading journal. This is really critical because if you open your charts while you're still in a vulnerable state, you can immediately go right back into threat mode. This is your safe space to process what happened. So when we get to this analyze step, what I want you to do is answer 3 specific questions in your journal. Question 1, what was my specific error in that trade? Not, I'm a bad trader or I always do this. Specifically, what exactly did you do wrong? For example, I entered too many times without checking the higher time frame. I sized too large for my account size. I held through my stop loss hoping it would turn around. Question 2, What was my mental state going into that trade? Were you already tilted from a previous loss? Were you distracted by stress in your personal life? Were you bored and looking for action? Were you using the charts to take out your emotions and stress for the day? Overconfident from winning streaks? What was going on? What was your mental state before the trade? Because it affects your decision making and changes everything completely. And the third question is, what would I do differently next time? Again, be specific, not be more disciplined. What specifically would you do? Next time I'll set an alarm to check the higher time frame before every entry. Next time I'll use position size calculators before every trade. Next time I'll place my stop loss immediately after entry, no exceptions. And now, as you're doing this analysis, pay attention to your thoughts. If you start spiraling into shame, I'm so stupid, I always do this, I'm never going to be a good trader, that's your threat mode creeping back in. If that happens, stop with the analysis and go back to step 2 and re-regulate yourself. The analysis, it's supposed to feel curious, not shameful. Because when we get curious about something, we can make changes. When we can focus on making changes, we can put a plan in place to grow and get better with our trading. And remember, the point of this step is we're collecting data on what's going on. We're not judging ourselves. There's no judging in the analysis phase. There's no judging in any phase because we're all human. We all make mistakes. We have all been there, okay? You're not alone. You're not the only one doing this. This step is important because by opening your journal and answering these specific questions, you're using your prefrontal cortex and intentionally activating the logical part of your brain and building a plan for yourself. This is going to further weaken the striatum's grip and strengthen conscious decision making, which shifts you from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And you're also training a new pattern in your brain that a loss leads to a pause and pause leads to analysis. So now, every single time you do this, you're building that new pathway for yourself. And the fourth step is decide. So once you've analyzed, now you have a conscious choice to make. You have 3 options with this choice. The first option is that you resume trading. And choose this option only if you are fully regulated. Your body feels calm, your mind is clear, you can follow your strategy just fine. When you can honestly say yes to all of those, you're back in learning mode and you're out of threat mode. The second option is to take a break. Set a timer for 30 minutes, go for a walk, eat lunch, do something completely different, and then come back and check in with yourself again. Am I in learning mode now? If yes, you can resume trading. If no, move to option 3. And option 3 is you're done for the day. Close your platform, walk away, and protect your capital. Come back tomorrow because the market is always going to be there, but your account might not be. And it is really important to remember that there is no right answer to this. Some days you're going to be able to resume trading, while others you're going to need a break. And some days you're going to need to stop altogether, maybe for a day or 2, and that's okay. The goal isn't to always keep trading decisions from learning mode instead of threat mode. Threat mode says I have to keep trading. I have to make my money back. I can't stop trading now, feeling bad about the loss I took. Because sometimes the wisest choice is to stop. And choosing to stop is not weakness or failure on your part. Choosing to stop when you can't regulate yourself is one of the most professional things you can do. You're protecting your capital, refusing to reinforce old patterns, and acting from conscious intention instead of automatic habit. That is a huge strength, not a weakness. The 5th and final step is to document. You want to write down what happened and what worked. This might seem really simple, but it's actually the most important step for retraining. So in your journal, write something like this. What happened? I took a $150 loss on NQ. I noticed these threat mode indicators: sweaty palms, racing heart, panic rising. I used the 5-step protocol by closing my charts, doing box breathing for 3 minutes, analyzing the error in my journal of entering without higher time frame confirmation, and I chose to stop trading for the day. Next time, I'll remember that stopping protects my capital. What happened was I took a loss and I started to revenge trade, but I caught myself after 1 trade. I halted, regulated with the box breathing, analyzed the error, and chose to resume trading after 30 minutes. I was able to follow my strategy for the rest of the session. To do next, because what you're doing is explicitly telling yourself, this is the new pattern we follow. This is what we do now when we take a loss. It's not your way anymore. And every single time you write it down, you're reinforcing that new pathway. You're clearing new brush, pushing logs out of the way. Loss, halt, regulate, analyze, decide. This is the pathway that you're striatum, that this is our new automatic response to a loss now. And over time, through repetition, this new pattern becomes as automatic as the old one was. Eventually, you won't even have to consciously remember the protocol anymore. Your striatum will just execute it automatically. So you'll take a loss and automatically pause, breathe, check in with yourself, and it will become who you are as not something that you have to remember how to do. And that's the goal we want to get to. But I do want to emphasize something here, okay? This is a practice, not a one-time fix. So you're going to forget sometimes. You'll revenge trade and then remember, oh shoot, I was supposed to halt, wasn't I? That is completely normal. You're trying to interrupt a pattern that you've practiced hundreds of times. And when you're trying to remember a new pattern that you've only practiced a few times, that old pathway is still going to be much, much stronger than this new one we're trying to form. But every single time you do remember, even if it's after you've already revenge traded, that's a win. That's good because you're building awareness. You're strengthening that new pathway, and give yourself some credit for that. That's important. Now, I really want to talk about realistic expectations for how long this takes, because I think this is where a lot of traders get discouraged and give up too soon. Retraining your striatum is not a quick fix kind of thing, okay? It's not something you do once and you're cured. You are literally rewiring neural pathways in your brain that have been formed for years. That takes a lot of time and repetition to do. You can't rewire years of wiring overnight. So a realistic month-by-month breakdown, let's go over that real quick so you have an idea of what to expect. For the first month, the protocol is going to feel really hard, clunky, unnatural, and honestly, you're probably going to forget to use it most of the time. You're going to take a loss, immediately revenge trade, and then 10 minutes later think, oh, I was supposed to halt with that, wasn't I? This is really normal. You're trying to interrupt a pattern that you've practiced hundreds of times and replace it with a pattern you've only practiced a handful of times. You're not trying to never revenge trade again. You're just trying to notice when it's happening and become aware of it sooner than you did in the past. And give yourself credit for that awareness when it comes up, because that's very important. We want to celebrate building that awareness because that's the first brush we moved out of the way. By month 2 or 3, we start catching ourselves a little bit earlier in this pattern. Instead of revenge trading 5 times and then remembering the protocol, maybe now you revenge trade once or twice and remember. Or maybe you get the urge to revenge trade and you remember before you actually do it. This new pathway is starting to get stronger and the old pathway is starting to weaken because you're using it less and less. And that's awesome. Sometimes you'll still forget. That's normal. You'll still have those days where you spiral. That is okay. That's just old pattern. Slip-ups happen, it's normal. But those days, they're going to become less and less frequent for you. And when they do happen, you'll see you recover a lot faster. The confidence in yourself that you can do this the right way. Month 4 to 6 is where something really interesting starts to happen, because you're going to start noticing the threat mode happening before you even feel the urge to revenge trade. So what's going to happen is you'll take a loss and immediately notice, hey, my heart just started racing, my breathing just got shallow, I'm going into threat mode right now. And sometimes, not every time, you're automatically going to halt yourself without even thinking about it. And this is a sign that the protocol is starting to become automatic for you. That's what I do now. You still have to consciously choose the protocol sometimes, but other times it starts to happen. It starts becoming a reflex for you. By month 7 to 12, this is your new normal. By the end of the first year, if you've been consistently practicing the protocol, something profound starts to shift in. New pattern is fully automatic now. You take a loss and you automatically pause. You automatically check in with yourself. You automatically start breathing. You don't have to remember to do it anymore. You don't have to force yourself to do it anymore. Your brain just does it. This new pathway, the brush and the logs are all gone. It's a super highway for you now, just like the revenge trading used to be. It's going to fade from so much disuse. And what's really interesting about all of this is when this happens, revenge trading is going to start feeling really uncomfortable and wrong. Your striatum has been so thoroughly retrained with this new protocol that the old pattern actually feels foreign to you now. Yeah, you might still occasionally feel the urge to revenge trade. That's normal. We're human. We all have emotions, but it's going to feel more like a distant memory than an overwhelming compulsion in your body, okay? And when you do feel it, that automatic response you're going to have is to pause, breathe, and make a conscious choice versus immediately jumping back in. This is the goal. This is where we want to be. This is where you're headed. But I need to be really clear with you that this takes time. You're not going to retrain years of habits in 2 weeks or even 2 months. Most traders need at least 6 months of consistent practice before the new pattern feels truly automatic. And that is okay, because that is how brains work. The striatum learns through repetition over time, and there's no shortcut for that. But if you stick with it, if you keep practicing this protocol every single time you take a loss, it will become automatic. I remember when I was about 3 months into live trading for myself. I was still figuring things out, making mistakes, but honestly, generally moving in the right direction. It was good. But one day, I took a $250 loss on what I knew was a really solid setup. The trade was good. I followed my strategy. The market just didn't cooperate. Sometimes that happens, right? That's just trading. But the second that loss registered, for some reason, I felt my chest tighten and my hands started shaking and my blood rushed from my head to my toes. And this voice in my head started screaming at me, "You cannot end the day red. You have to make that money back. Take another trade now." So I did. I didn't have analysis. I didn't check my setup. I just had pure panic clicking, entering all these trades, right? And I ended up losing $200 more. And now I was down $450. It was like I was watching myself from outside of my body, like an out-of-body experience. I could see what I was doing. I knew that it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself from doing it. And I opened 3 more trades in a matter of about 5 minutes, and none of them were my setup at all. I don't even remember clicking the button to get into those trades, but by the time I had finally stopped, I was down $800 from $250 loss, okay? I sat there staring at my screen and I just felt at a loss for words, because that was a $1,000 account that I was trying to trade on, and I just blew 80% of it, and I just couldn't stop thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I stop doing this? Any reasonable person would have stopped after this first loss. Why am I like this? I just don't get it. I honestly just thought I was a weak, undisciplined person, and I just kept telling myself, people like you aren't meant to be traders. And at the time, I didn't know about threat error management. I just thought I was weak or undisciplined, but now I understand. I went into full error mode, and honestly, this was one of the turning points for myself when I realized how much trading and psychology were truly fused together and how much psychology actually played a role in trading. And that is when I started putting all of this together for myself and started talking with other traders about it too. When I would talk to other traders about this situation, going into this error mode, just like a pilot who panics and makes things worse, what I was realizing was that every other trader I was talking to was going through this too, and our amygdalas completely took over our brains. Striatum executed the automatic patterns perfectly, and we had no protocols to interrupt it. So every single time we went into threat mode like this, our prefrontal cortexes went offline, which meant the striatum, again, it only knows how to do one thing: execute the pattern. And not only is the striatum running on autopilot now, intermittent reinforcement is making it even more powerful for us. So sometimes when those revenge trades won, not often, but sometimes, that was enough to keep my striatum thinking, yeah, keep doing this. This actually might work out for us, because now we don't have to feel shame or embarrassment. We kind of skirted by it. Everything's good now, right? I was just running on an automatic pattern that I had practiced hundreds of times, and no one had taught me how to interrupt it. Learning the protocol, understand what was actually happening in my brain, it changed everything for me. And I was able to stop blaming myself for lacking discipline and learn how to start working with my brain instead of against it. And over the course of about roughly 6 months or so, I was able to retrain my striatum to respond this way. So now when I take a loss, I can automatically pause, automatically check in with myself, automatically choose whether to keep trading or stop. It's not a technique I use anymore. It's just who I am as a trader. And you deserve that too. You have worked so hard at this already, and you already know what happens if you keep doing it this way. Don't you think you deserve to see what happens when you do this the right way instead? All right, so let's talk about what you should actually do with all of this information, because I know it was a lot today. First thing I want you to understand is that you don't lack discipline or willpower or anything like that, okay? Your striatum, it learned a pattern, and when you're stressed, that automatic pattern takes over your body. That is biology. That is how the brain works. The good news is you can retrain it, but it takes time and a completely different approach than what you've been trying. So the first thing I want you to do is write down the 5-step protocol and tape it up next to your computer screen so you can always see it when you're trading. If you don't feel like writing it out, I've created a 1-page checklist that has all 5 steps, the threat mode mode indicators to watch for, and the regulation techniques to use. The link is in the show notes below. Go ahead and download it. It's completely free. Print it out and tape it up right next to your monitor. Make it impossible to forget for yourself, because when you're in threat mode and your prefrontal cortex is offline, you're not going to remember all 5 steps in that moment. But if you have it right there in front of you, you can follow it even when you can't think clearly. The second step is to commit to using it. And the next time you take a loss, and there will be a next time because we all take losses, I want you to use this protocol. And you're probably going to forget the first few times. Remember, that's okay. But every time you remember, even if it's after you've already revenge traded, follow the protocol anyways from there moving forward. You don't have to do it perfectly every time. As soon as you recognize it's starting to happen, start doing the protocol then, okay? This is how we start building the new neural pathways. The third step is to be patient with yourself, because this is going to take time. Months, not days or weeks. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have days where you forget everything and spiral anyways, and that doesn't mean you're failing at trading. That doesn't mean you're not making progress. That means you're retraining a deeply ingrained habit, and that's hard. But if you keep coming back to the protocol, if you keep practicing, it will become automatic for you. In your striatum, it will learn the new pattern over time. If you do this for 6 months, you're going to be a completely different trader, because you've retrained your automatic patterns to work for you instead of against you. All right, guys, that's what I have for you today. I feel like this framework explains so much about why traders revenge trade even when they know better. And the key takeaway I want you to remember is that revenge trading isn't a character flaw. There's nothing wrong with you. All that happened is your striatum learned a pattern through repetition and intermittent reinforcement, okay? And when you're stressed, that automatic pattern takes over, but you can retrain it. It just takes time and a different approach. So please try to stop beating yourself up for not being disciplined enough, okay? And learn how to start working with your brain instead of against it. Download the protocol checklist. The link is in the show notes. Print it up, tape it up next to your monitor. And remember, you have worked so hard at this. You deserve to see what happens if you do this the right way. Thanks for listening to the Mental Edge Trading Psychology Podcast. I'm Sarah, and I'll see you next week.